In 2002, when I was 15 years old, I was kidnapped from my friend's front yard by a man I would later find out is a serial killer. It was when he stepped in to hand me the magazines that things changed. It was a small caliber handgun, and he pressed it in and he said, "Come with me."
How did 15-year-old Kara Robinson outsmart a seasoned serial killer and escape his hideous lair? June 24, 2004, West Columbia. Friends Heather and Kara decided to spend the day by the lake, soaking up the sun. Just before leaving the house, Heather's mother asked the girls to water the flowers in the garden. To save time, Kara offered to take care of the flower garden while she took a shower. Heather went to the shower, and Kara Robinson went out into the yard. The girl was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, and she had no shoes on. At that moment, a green Pontiac was driving slowly down the street. The car first drove past, but after a minute turned around and pulled into the driveway. The car door opened, and a smiling man in a cap and a goatee, who looked to be in his 30s, stepped out. He was holding a stack of magazines. He didn't look threatening, so Kara didn't suspect him. The man said good morning and asked,
"Hi, are your parents home now?"
Kara replied that they didn't live in the house. Then he asked if any of the adults were there, and the girl said that they had all gone to work. This was exactly the answer he had been hoping for. The man closed the distance between him and the girl, as if handing her magazines, but instead pulled out a gun and put it to her head.
"Keep your mouth shut and listen to me, or I'll shoot you." "Got it. Now get in the car."
The man forced Kara into a large trash can in the back seat. He closed the lid, but not tightly, so she wouldn't suffocate. Kara realized that if she wanted to survive, she had to play by the kidnapper's rules. Before we tell you how Kara managed to outwit the maniac and escape, let's go back 8 years to better understand the danger of the situation she found herself in. September 9th, 1996. 16-year-old Sophia Silva goes missing. She decided to do her homework outdoors and went out onto the porch of her house. This was the last time she was seen alive. Sophia's parents noticed that the girl was missing only when they called her to dinner. 5 weeks later, her body, wrapped in a white sheet, floated in a lake near Highway 3 in King George County. Forensic experts recorded that the kidnapper had shaved her hair, including in her private parts. 6 months later, on May 1st, 1997, at 3 p.m., a few hundred meters from Sophia's house, 12-year-old Catherine Fisk and her younger sister, 5-year-old Christine, got off a school bus. After that, no one saw them again. A few hours later that same day, the girl's father, returning home from work, found Christine's backpack lying abandoned in the grass in the front yard. After checking the house and making sure the children were not home, he called the police. A few days later, Christine and Katie's bodies were found under a bridge in the South Anna River, 25 miles 40 kilometers from their home. Forensic experts determined that the assailant had strangled his victims after taking advantage of them. It was clear that both abductions were the work of the same person. All 3 girls were abducted from their homes after school. There was no sign of a struggle. All the victims were shaved, and all the bodies were found in bodies of water. The coincidence of the collected DNA samples did not come as a surprise to detectives. These girls were not the only victims. From 1996 to 2002, an unusually high number of young women disappeared. All of these cases occurred along the American Highway, US 29. At least 4 other girls were murdered along this highway. The unknown maniac was nicknamed Stalker US 29, or Road 29 Stalker. In the media, Alicia Reynolds was the first victim of the stalker. She was going shopping with her mother and left her house at 7:30 a.m., but her mother never arrived. Later that day, at 6 p.m., Alicia's car was found abandoned on a highway near Clapper. Alicia's remains were found the day she disappeared in the middle of an isolated field that police say only a local could have known about. In May of that year, the bodies of 2 more women were found at their campsite in Shenandoah National Park, which lies along Highway 29. 24-year-old Juliana Williams and 26-year-old Laura Winans. On September 18th, 4 months later, 10 kilometers from the discovery of the remains of the first victim of the stalker, another corpse was discovered, 20-year-old Anna McDaniel. This time, the killer tried to burn the remains. After the murder of Sophia and the Fisk sisters, a task force was formed. The main goal was to catch the perverted killer. All the agencies involved worked out 20,000 versions. Despite this, the detectives were never able to establish who kidnapped and took the lives of 3 underage girls. Samples were collected, such as fibers of some fabric, and even DNA, namely the maniac's hair and fluid. Unfortunately, these samples did not match the DNA of any of the suspects. The beast remains at large. On June 24, 2004, a stranger in a cap gets into his green Pontiac and drives off. Kara Robinson counts the number of times the car makes U-turns. She decides she tried to escape at the first opportunity to get back to Heather's house, so she tries to remember the approximate route they took. To be honest, I'm amazed at how a 15-year-old girl who had just been kidnapped was able to control her panic and hold on so tightly, developing an escape plan from the first seconds of the kidnapping. This is some kind of, damn, superpower. For comparison, many people in an emergency situation cannot dial 911 while holding their phone in their hand, because due to severe stress they look at the device, not understanding at that moment how it even works. It will be even more interesting. In addition to calculating the route, the girl focused on remembering as many little things as possible. To be honest, I saw this in some movie, but I can't remember which one. If anyone remembers, please write in the comments. So, she memorizes the serial number stamped on the bottom of the trash can she's in, and also memorizes the songs and genre of music the kidnapper is currently listening to on the radio in his green Pontiac. Kara felt the scumbag slow down and stop on the side of the road. The man threw back the lid of the container, put soft handcuffs on the girl's wrists, and stuffed a gag in her mouth, convinced that now she definitely wouldn't go anywhere. He put the lid back on, started the engine, and drove on. It's not known how much time passed after that, but it couldn't have been more than an hour. Kara felt the Pontiac make a sharp turn and stop. She heard the kidnapper get out of the car. He took out the container and dragged it across the concrete floor. Kara heard the heavy sound of the door closing. When the kidnapper let her out of the container, she saw that she was inside an apartment or a small house. Her eyes immediately scanned the interior. The room was dirty, but tastefully furnished. He took her in his arms, sat her down on the sofa and said,
"Now we'll see if anyone is looking for you."
After this phrase, he turned on the TV. To his delight, there was no news about the girl's kidnapping on the air. Shrugging, he said,
"It seems like no one cares that you're missing."
Despite Kara being bound, the psychopath didn't blindfold her. Even without context, it suggested that he was never going to let her go. She continued to collect and memorize information.
I was taking into account different things to identify this guy when I escaped, because I knew I would.
Kara recalled. She was surprised to find the room literally filled with cages with small animals and aquariums with all kinds of lizards and tropical fish. The kidnapper took out his notebook and began asking the girl personal questions. He wrote down all the answers.
The man who took me liked to keep little trophies, so one of the things he did was ask me a lot of questions and write down the answers.
She said this lasted about an hour, after which the sick bastard moved on to the root cause of the kidnapping.
I prayed nonstop to find a way to escape.
His next 18 hours became her personal hell. He did whatever he wanted to her, embodying his sick fantasies. Kara did not resist and suppress the urge to scream. She was afraid that he would become more violent. The only possible option she saw was to abstract from everything that was happening. The girl allowed her mind to leave her body.
I don't even want to mention the homemade wooden device that was supposed to fix his legs in a comfortable position.
In between episodes of violence, Kara talked to him as if everything was fine, as if he was her boyfriend and not the pervert who had kidnapped her a few hours earlier. In this way, she gradually managed to gain his trust. Kara was willing to play this game for even a slim chance of escaping and seeing her family again. You just imagine how strong a person she is, because even then she didn't lose hope and continued to collect evidence that she thought would be useful in the future when she escaped. And this information will help catch the scumbag and prove his involvement in her kidnapping. Kara remembered the brand of cigarettes he smoked, Marlboro Reds. She also noticed the business cards on the refrigerator that listed his personal doctor and dentist. When the psychopath let her use the restroom, she noticed a comb with clumps of hair tangled in the bristles, as well as feminine hygiene products. He probably had a wife. At some point, the scumbag lost his guard and left a loaded gun within reach of his victim. Kara knew this was her chance, but she was afraid to take the risk, because if she failed, it would surely be a death sentence for her. Over the next few hours, she was drugged. She was abused and eventually lost consciousness, but not before he tied her to the bed next to him. In the morning, the kidnapper gave Kara a sleeping pill to make her sleep. To be on the safe side, he tied one of her legs to the bed and made sure the handcuffs were in place, then lay down next to her and dozed off. Luckily for the girl, she woke up before he did. When Kara saw that the creature was still asleep, she knew it was now or never. She managed to free one of her hands from the handcuffs, which allowed her to free her leg from the bed. She then carefully left the bedroom and ran out the front door. I wish I could have seen the face of that monster when he woke up and saw that his prey had escaped. When Kara ran out into the street, she stopped the first car she could find. There were two men in the car. The girl tried to quickly explain who she was and what had happened to her. The handcuffs dangling from her wrists left no doubt that this terrible story was true. Kara immediately pointed to the apartment where she was being held and asked the men in the car to remember her. She got into the car and together they drove to the sheriff's office. There is a version that the cops did not immediately believe her story, as Kara herself recalls.
When I told my story to the officer on duty, he looked at me more than skeptically.
They believed her only when they compared it with the description of the girl who disappeared in Western Colombia, because she was that girl. The police went to arrest the kidnapper. They took Kara with them. But when they arrived, she couldn't remember the apartment she wanted. Fortunately, the manager of the building helped. Thanks to Kara, the cops knew what questions to ask. Remember the details she remembered, the red hair in the comb. When the cops asked which apartment the bearded man and the red-haired woman lived in, the manager immediately gave the names, Richard and Nadezhda Evans. At that moment, the dispatcher checked to see if the green Volkswagen was registered to either of the couple. Bingo! The puzzle was complete. When the police knocked on the door of Richard Evans' apartment, no one answered. The building manager opened the door with his key. As you might have guessed, no one was in the apartment. Already having a warrant, the cops began to thoroughly search the premises. What they found was, to put it mildly, shocking. For example, a box hidden from prying eyes. It contained stacks of newspaper clippings related to the kidnappings and murders of Sophia and sisters Christine and Katie. Maniacs love so-called trophies. This gives them the opportunity to dive into memories and relive past events over and over again. And when it stops sticking, they go hunting again. But that's not all. In the same box was the first direct evidence of the crimes committed by Richard Evans, namely, photographs. I think you understand what nature these photographs were. Some of them recorded the moment of violence that 38-year-old Evans committed on his victims. Where was his wife at that moment? At the time of Kara's abduction, Nadia was vacationing at Disneyland, and Evans took advantage of the opportunity while the house was, so to speak, empty. Just imagine, his wife went away for a few days, and he immediately went hunting. Kara was provided with medical care at the hospital, where samples of Evans's DNA were taken. In the meantime, Investigative actions were ongoing at the crime scene. When the detectives received the results of the DNA test, they had every reason to believe that Evans was not only a kidnapper and rapist, but a serial killer. The test showed a match to DNA samples found on the bodies of previous victims. On June 27th, Evans called his sister and said,
Hey, listen. I've committed more crimes than I can remember. Horrible crimes. We need to meet.
The sister, as a conscientious citizen, passed this information to the police. Although, I am sure, her phone was tapped anyway, they agreed to meet in Sarasota. When the serial killer showed up for the scheduled meeting, the cops were already waiting for him. Realizing that he had fallen into a trap, Evans tried to escape, but the area was surrounded. While fleeing, he hit the tires of his car on the spikes that the police had laid on the road. Lost control of the car forced him to stop. The police surrounded the car and tried to convince him to surrender. Richard sat there with a gun in his hand. The moment the K9 officer released his dog, the dog began to bite the suspect. Evans put the gun to his temple and pulled the trigger. He was pronounced dead at 10:52 p.m., 27th, 2002. Although the monster was dead, the cops finally figured out who took the lives of the three girls in 1990 and 1997. When carpet fibers taken from Evans' former home in Fredericksburg were compared to those found on all three girls, they matched. Blue fibers found on the remains of the previous victims matched the faux fur on the handcuffs that Kara had been wearing. Yes, he used the same handcuffs in all cases. What's more, forensics showed that the palm prints found on the inside of the trunk belonged to Christine Fisk. Her fingerprints were also found inside the car. 5 years after the kidnapping and murder, detectives dug up evidence that back in 1987, Evans was sentenced to 3 years probation for taking out his penis in front of a 15-year-old girl and driving it in the middle of the street. This is just an interesting, disgusting fact. When Hope saw her husband's true face, she could not believe it and accept the fact that she had married a monster. We had a strong relationship built on mutual trust. I knew nothing about his barbaric extracurricular activities. Yeah, such mutual trust is normal. In addition, the police put forward the version that, presumably, Evans and the stalker from US 29 are one and the same person. Moreover, in '96 he lived just an hour's drive from US 29. Unfortunately, they were unable to connect the murders I already mentioned on that highway with Evans. However, in their opinion, it was unlikely that several serial killers were operating in the same location. But at the time of recording this video, the police and investigators are still not sure whether the stalker from Highway 29 was Richard Mark Evans. That is, to this day the stalker from US 29 remains unknown, and his victims were older than Richard's victims. I'll tell you more. Between 2009 and 2014, at least 5 more women disappeared on that damn highway. And this is at least 7 years after Evans' death. It is not known whether this is the same stalker or someone else who decided to imitate the unknown serial killer. The investigation is still ongoing. The murder cases of Alice Reynolds, Julian Williams and Laura Winans are still unsolved. Thanks to Kara's brave actions and cold-blooded mind, the psychopath Robinson will never be able to hurt anyone again. Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott, who was the lead investigator on her case, was impressed by Kara's composure in the face of horror few could have imagined. He saw potential in her and offered her a summer job in his office. Kara thought it was a good idea and set her sights on a career in crime fighting. In 2010, 8 years after those horrific events, Kara graduated from the South Carolina Justice Academy. Now a full-time employee of the Sheriff's Department, she is putting her personal experience and training to good use by becoming a school counselor. She got married in April 2011. She now has 2 young sons. In 2013, she decided to put her police career aside to focus on her family. Today, Kara is a sought-after speaker and active participant on social media platforms such as Instagram. She not only shares her story with a wide audience, but also teaches people how to stay safe in a world full of hidden dangers. Although her emotional recovery was a long and difficult process, she got through it and wants others to know. The person who has the advantage does not always come out on top. She has become living proof of this. This is a story. Kids, thank you for watching. Take care of yourself.